Will the real Weatherby stand up? Sabrina's riding through the sky on a flying chair on her way to school, which is more inventive than flying a broom. But then she just warps to the hole anyways. Then why did she fly in the sky? I guess for fun. She sees Miss Grundy and gets scared because she's late. But then she ignores Sabrina and yells at Weatherby because she's too overworked. She has to teach too many classes, and Weatherby gets reminded that he has a speech to give. Sabrina feels sorry for him and wishes she could help. Then Hilda warps over to her in small form and tells her that witches aren't allowed to do good deeds. I hate that about the show. He wishes there was more than one of them. The worst part is that Hilda meddles in her life and tells her not to do good herself. She's supposed to be part of her family, so it feels like a betrayal of her. Despite Hilda telling her not to do good deeds, she somehow doesn't instantly come undo the spell when Sabrina uses magic to create a ton of different Weatherbys. Then we see a bunch of Weatherbys show up at Miss Grundy's classroom with a mop, and for some reason they're all cheerful and singing and then leave instead of wondering why there's more than one of them. Sabrina thinks that Hilda must have arranged this. And Grundy faints. Sabrina locks Weatherby in his office, and the Weatherbys all talk at once, being a substitute teacher for Grundy, telling the classroom that they're gonna create a moon rocket as work for today. I guess everyone's assuming that they all memorized the script, which is the only way it makes sense that they all know to say the same thing as each other. It is a good thing it was explained that the Weatherbys staying together and acting silly was Hilda's doing, as mean as it was of her, because at least that explains why the plot took this turn. I remember really smiling at this episode because of this. It's hilarious. This might be my favorite episode. Weatherby sees the Weatherbys rocket away. I have to assume that Hilda used magic so that they were able to make such a rocket so fast. The dogs freak out at seeing the rocket and ask if it's Martians and hide in the bushes. Why are the dogs so close to school? That never made sense. The existence of this rocket makes magic so obvious. Sabrina finds out that the Weatherbys are going to talk to an audience, and Grundy finds that out too. The Weatherbys juggle and ride unicycles. I still can't stop smiling at how silly they're being. Sabrina thinking that she's got to think fast reminds me of the biggest plot hole in this story. She should have just instantly pointed and undone the spell as soon as the Weatherbys weren't in front of people. She could have erased everyone's memories of seeing them after using magic to get rid of them. So at that point, there was no reason she shouldn't have done it in front of people. But the plot was amusing enough that it took a while to get annoyed at this. After Sabrina's aunts annoy her, and Zelda fortunately feels sorry for her, Sabrina's told that the PTA flipped over the Weatherby brothers and their suggestions. We see the students somehow acting dorky and reciting what they learned in science class because of the Weatherbys. And Grundy has a crush on the Weatherby brothers. Sabrina says happily that everything turned out alright, and Hilda's amusingly amused that in her haste, she created a female Weatherby by accident.
In our haste, we must have created a she-Weatherby. Oh, don't worry.
You'd think she'd have to intentionally create her. Then she warps her away, and somehow she says, "Here I go again," instead of asking how she got here. This is the funniest episode in the show. Too bad it felt so arbitrary. Sabrina wanted to make more Weatherbys for a while, so that he wouldn't feel so overworked, but Hilda thought to spy on her and ruin her good deed by making the Weatherbys stick together. And somehow Sabrina didn't instantly point and undo the spell. But it was amusing enough.
Oh hi, and now we say goodbye, goodbye!
Caveman. Sabrina tells Harvey that the answer is the Roman Empire, and Harvey's having trouble looking up the answers to his ancient history homework. Sabrina says a chant to warp Ambrose to her rather than just pointing, or using the magic book to get her answer, and tells him that she needs an authority on ancient history. He says he's in the middle of a battle while holding a sword. Doesn't he realize he can just stay in the present for as long as he wants and warp back to the exact time period he wants to have fun in, whenever he wants, down to the second? I guess he only does what he does because he's bored. And arbitrarily, he summons a caveman to Sabrina to help her, even though he would know that the caveman wouldn't be able to talk. This story is memorably annoying because these all-powerful witches are powerless to deal with this caveman. He's acting annoyingly stupid, and Hilda tells Sabrina to bring him with her on the car ride to school, being amused at the situation. Harvey somehow thinks that the caveman is a hippie, and the caveman goes to high school but is dressed like a little kid. Sabrina wouldn't be that stupid. You'd think these witches would just warp Ambrose back to them instantly and get him to return the caveman to his proper time period. They could also create an exact duplicate of Ambrose, and he'd be just as useful for doing that. They're omnipotent. I guess Sabrina is just so polite that she doesn't want to bother Ambrose by saying the chance to warp him to her again because he's busy. But come on! The witches could easily just point at Ugg to paralyze him for the entire story. Instead, the caveman makes Weatherby faint, and Sabrina floats him to his office and makes him say he didn't see a thing.
You didn't see a thing.
Somehow he says, heck I didn't, when you'd think the spell would be brainwashing him into actually believing that. What's the point of making him say I didn't see a thing otherwise? Clearly she was telling her magic to brainwash him. The caveman tries to hit something in the hedges with his club. Some dogs see a chance to get even with Salem, and the caveman thinks he's hearing a game animal, and tries to hurt Salem. So he naturally uses magic to send the caveman away. Good thing he was merciful and did that. Sabrina goes on a car ride with Harvey seeing a big commotion, and the caveman destroys a dinosaur skeleton at a museum. She could have easily just pointed at the caveman and paralyzed him. She had plenty of time. She uses magic to fix the fossil. And I kinda giggled because she did it right in front of the security guard, and he just said, thanks. And makes a silly sound with his lips.
There you are.
Thanks.
The ants were told by the school to keep Ugg off the streets, and Sabrina magically warps Ambrose back in time. Too bad she didn't think to do that a lot earlier. He lost the battle with the sheriff. I guess he was too polite to use witchcraft to instantly, easily win. And it says behind bars that he'll be out in 60 days. There's a guy right behind him with the crossbow in the cell, as he says that warlocks are law-abiding citizens. But that still doesn't explain why he's not going to instantly warp back to the present time. Witches aren't allowed to use magic for good, so you'd think they wouldn't proudly say that they're law-abiding citizens. And if he sent the caveman to Sabrina to bother her because he knows he's not allowed to actually help her with his magic, he should have just explained that he's not allowed to help her and not sent the caveman to her at all. So he wouldn't do that. Sabrina should know that he doesn't have to stay here for 60 days. And she could just point and instantly free him. They see the caveman sleeping, and that wastes time for a while. Sabrina says she didn't use magic on him, and he combs his hair. Am I expected to believe he knew how to comb his hair by himself? Sabrina's asked what he's going to do, and she warps her aunts to a club for the Archies. She says that the caveman joined Archie's band, and he's obnoxiously banging on a drum that clearly doesn't really belong with the 70s music playing. Somehow, the story doesn't end with the caveman being sent back to his own time, but it was nice to see a happy ending. I just wish we saw the point where the Archies decided that the caveman belonged in their band, because it comes out of complete nowhere. All he did was act like a very stereotypical caveman. Why would he meet them in the first place? This story was about Sabrina wanting an ancient history expert to help her give Harvey the answers to his ancient history homework. And the plot is forced because Ambrose somehow thinks that she wants a caveman for help, when he should know that a caveman wouldn't be able to talk to her and would just be a nuisance. And she's someone that he loves, so he wouldn't send him to her to annoy her on purpose. I'm forced to assume the reason he was having a battle back in time is that he was bored, and it wouldn't be a fun game if he just cheated and used magic to guarantee his victory. But he should know that he can just go back to the present day and stay there for as long as he wants. And so he doesn't have to go right back in time and leave a caveman with Sabrina. He doesn't have to stay in a dungeon for 60 days either. He could just warp home instantly. Only he knows the exact year that the caveman's from and where he lived. So it makes sense that none of the other witches are warping him back in time, because they don't want to send him to the wrong place and change history. Although, Hilda is supposed to be an evil witch, so she won't actually care. Still, if Sabrina can just summon Ambrose to her with a chant, she sure is being stupid by deciding that it's better to humor him and let him stay in that past, when she could just summon him again right away and prevent the entire plot. Also, these witches could have easily cast a spell to keep the caveman frozen in time for the whole episode. So the whole episode felt forced because it's about a caveman wandering around school grounds, somehow being able to cause trouble when Sabrina's a witch, and somehow he was able to destroy a dinosaur fossil when she had plenty of time to stop him. Good thing she returns it to normal. I'm glad she is able to do good deeds with magic in the show without being scolded and punished and prevented from doing them, but it's too rare. The way the caveman acted was so cliched that he was too predictable to feel worth how forced that part of the plot was. Go figure, he goes around trying to hit things with his club. The way he acted in the kitchen at first was forced. Just because he's a caveman doesn't mean he'd be that stupid. It came out of nowhere that he ended up becoming a drummer for the Archies because we never saw him interact with them. I'm glad there was a happy ending. He ended up sleeping all day because he was spending just a few hours in the night drumming for them. Yeah, it really should have been explained that Sabrina used magic on him. That'd make more sense. The story went from the witches being upset that they're going to be stuck with him for 60 days in their house, to the caveman sleeping peacefully and everything being fine at the drop of a hat. Also, you'd think witches would be able to read out a spell to make the caveman able to speak modern English so that he's not confusing everyone. I found this story tedious from how confusing it was even when I was just watching it casually.